There's a hidden architecture being built all around us. It's not made of steel or concrete, it's built from code and regulation. It's a new kind of ledger, a sovereign ledger, and it's designed to track, to manage, and, well, ultimately, to control the flow of all economic activity. And this isn't some far-off theory. This is happening right now. The transition from physical money to a fully digitized, programmable currency is underway. And as central banks go from just issuing currency to actively architecting our entire financial system, the very meaning of financial freedom is being rewritten. We're here to look at the blueprint. Our investigation really kicks off with a ghost. Back in 2024, Canada was moving full steam ahead toward what's called a retail central bank digital currency, or CBDC, basically a digital loonie for everyday people. And then, just like that, the project got shelved, scaled down. The official story? Well, the public didn't want it, and there wasn't a clear reason to have it. But what if that whole public project was never the real goal? What if it was just a distraction, a bit of theater, while the real infrastructure of control was being put together, quietly, in the background? We have to ask, what took the place of the digital loonie?
So to figure out what happened, we're just going to follow the evidence. First, we'll look at why the public project vanished and what quietly replaced it. Then we're going to dissect the legal tool, this kind of hidden switch that gives the state a brand new kind of power. We'll get into the technology this switch controls, money with rules literally baked into its code. After that, we'll zoom out and look at the global picture, because it reveals a synchronized international strategy. And then, finally, we'll ask the biggest question of all. Is there any way out of this?
All right, let's jump into Section 1, the digital ghost. This is really the story of a very clever strategic pivot, a calculated move away from a public digital currency and towards something much more subtle and, frankly, a lot more powerful, a system of private sector regulation. Now, look closely at this timeline, because the order of events here is everything. Between 2023 and 2024, the Canadian government does its homework. It holds these public consultations and, surprise, surprise, finds out that people are really not on board with a state-run digital currency. So, late in 2024, the Bank of Canada officially puts the project on ice. It gets framed as a win for the little guy, for public opinion, but here's the thing. This is the misdirection. Because while everyone was looking at the ghost of the digital loonie, the real work was happening somewhere else. The Retail Payment Activities Act, or RPAA, comes into full force in 2025. This is the real story. The state didn't give up on its goal of financial control, it just changed its tactics. Instead of building its own system, which was clearly not going to fly politically, it built a legal cage to co-opt and control the private systems that were already out there. It traded the very visible hand of a state currency for the invisible wiring of state regulation.
And that brings us right to Section 2, the hidden switch. You see, this isn't really about tech, it's about the law. The Retail Payment Activities Act is the engine for this entire new system. On the surface, it looks like just another boring piece of financial legislation. But buried deep inside its text is a mechanism of absolutely extraordinary power.
Now, what's really fascinating here is this little trick of reclassification. For years, digital assets like stablecoins were generally treated as securities. That put them under the watch of market regulators, whose main job is to protect investors. But the RPAA performs this brilliant piece of legal alchemy. It says, nope, these aren't securities anymore. They are now payment instruments. That one little change shifts the entire oversight from those market regulators straight to the central security apparatus of the state, the Bank of Canada. The focus is no longer about protecting you from a bad investment. It's about monitoring the flow of transactions and the providers themselves. It's a huge shift from market conduct to state supervision.
So let's just cut through the jargon. What does this actually mean for you? This reclassification isn't some abstract legal debate. It is the construction of a remote control. By pulling the entire digital payment world under the direct supervision of the central bank, the state now holds the master switch to the services you probably use every single day. Your digital wallet, your stablecoin provider, they now exist only by permission of the federal government, under a national security framework. It literally connects your ability to buy groceries directly to a federal kill switch.
And that kill switch, it has a name. It is Section 96 of the Act. All of the regulatory language, all the talk about consumer protection and operational risk, it all leads right here. This is the core of the entire machine. This quote just nails it. It perfectly captures what Section 96 is all about.
You see, in a normal system, if you want to shut down a financial service, you need things like court orders, evidence, the right to an appeal, due process. But in the new world of high-speed digital finance, due process is seen as slow, clunky, a bug. Section 96 is the patch for that bug. It's a tool that's built for speed and decisiveness, and it's engineered to completely bypass the legal checks and balances we used to think were fundamental. And here's how it works. The mechanism is brutally efficient. Step 1. A single government minister decides that any delay in shutting down a payment provider would be, and I quote, prejudicial to the public interest. This is a subjective call, not a legal ruling. Step 2. Based on that belief alone, the minister issues a temporary order. This isn't a suggestion, it's a command to shut down, immediately. Step 3. The provider is shut down. For 30 days, their services are frozen, their operations are dead in the water. And only after all this has happened does the company get a chance to argue its case. Your right to appeal comes after the punishment has been delivered. The system is shut down first and questions are asked later. That's the power of Section 96. Okay, so let's move to Section 3, because this all builds on itself. A control switch is only useful if it's actually connected to something, and that something is the new form of money itself. We are walking into the era of programmable currency, money that is no longer just a neutral tool, but an active agent of policy. This comparison really shows the fundamental rewriting of the contract we have with money. The cash in your pocket is neutral. It doesn't care who you are, where you are, or what you're buying. It doesn't just disappear if you don't spend it. It's a passive, stable way to store value. Programmable money is the complete opposite. It's intelligent. Rules can be embedded right into its code. It can be programmed to only work in certain stores or in certain cities. Every single transaction is tracked, and maybe most profoundly, it can be programmed to expire. And these aren't just theories. These are the stated goals of these new systems. Things like automated tax clawbacks, where the government just takes its cut the instant a transaction happens. But the most psychologically powerful feature is something called demurrage. This is essentially money that rots. Imagine your savings account suddenly has a self-destruct button, money that is literally programmed to lose value or expire completely if you don't spend it fast enough. The justification is that it stimulates the economy, but what it really does is destroy the whole concept of saving. It turns your nest egg from an asset into a ticking liability. It forces this use it or lose it mindset, dismantling your ability to build any kind of long-term financial security. Okay, so let's zoom out to Section 4, the global blueprint. Because the Canadian model isn't some isolated experiment. It's one piece of a synchronized global pattern. All across the world, different countries are using different methods to get to the exact same place. This table lays the pattern bare. In Canada, the method is to regulate private assets using the RPAA. In the US, it's the proposed Genius Act, which would force private stablecoin companies to have one-to-one reserves and build in the technical power to freeze assets. In China, they just cut to the chase with a direct state-issued CBDC, the ECNY. So you see 3 different paths: regulate the players, mandate compliance from the players, or just become the player. But look at the outcome. In every single case, the state gets direct oversight. And in every single case, the system has a built-in ability to freeze assets. The key innovation might be a little different. Canada has its ministerial kill switch, the US mandates reserves, China is experimenting with interest-bearing digital cash, but the final destination is identical: a sovereign ledger under total state control. And if you think this is some niche issue, just look at the scale of this thing. As of early 2026, 134 countries are actively looking into this technology. And together, they represent 98% of the entire global economy. This isn't a trend. It's a total systemic rewiring of the world's financial architecture. The era of analog neutral money is ending. The era of the sovereign ledger is here. Which brings us to our final section. An analog escape? When the entire system is being designed for surveillance and control, is there any way to actually opt out? Well, in the face of this digital grid, a kind of counter-movement is starting to take shape, and it's all focused on resilience and autonomy. These are the strategies of resistance, and some of them are really low-tech, almost traditional. You see cash discounting programs which encourage people to use physical cash. You see new laws that make it illegal for, say, a landlord to demand rent only through electronic means, protecting a citizen's right to use cash. And of course, there's the oldest strategy in the book, holding wealth in physical assets like gold, which exist completely outside the digital ledger.
But there's also a high-tech resistance, things like decentralized ledgers and community currencies that operate peer-to-peer with no central boss, and even new concepts like guardian DAOs, that's decentralized autonomous organizations, which use the blockchain to secure a person's identity and manage welfare, basically creating a form of digital sovereignty that runs in parallel to the state system.
You know, ultimately, this is the one question that will define the next century. This shift to the sovereign ledger is one of the single greatest centralizations of power in human history. It fuses monetary policy with law enforcement and social engineering. When the money itself can be programmed to enforce rules, the person or the institution that writes that code holds absolute power. The power to permit, the power to deny, the power to incentivize, and the power to punish. So as this new architecture gets locked into place around us, we're left with one critical question we all have to answer. When money has rules, who do we trust to write them?